Today marks the end of the road for two historic industrial landmarks. The UK's biggest steelworks in Port Talbot is to cease production, while the UK's last coal-fired power station in Ratcliffe-on-Soar is also set to close. Joining me now, our business correspondent Paul Kelso, who's going to have much more on both of these stories on Business Live at 11:30, but delighted to say he joins us now with a bit of a preview. Paul, two historic landmarks, but also a sign of industrial change that is capturing these stories today, but also means job losses?
Yes, it does. It's a really significant day in British industrial history and marks a landmark, certainly in the coincidence of the closure of both of the Port Talbot steelworks, the blast furnace down there on the Welsh coast, and the last coal-fired power station in Britain at Ratcliffe-on-Soar in Nottinghamshire. The coincidence of these marks the transition that's happening, the impact on heavy industry of the move away from high carbon sources of energy like coal to lower carbon sources. In Port Talbot, the impact of that is going to be felt very, very sharply indeed by around 2,800 workers who are going to lose their jobs as a consequence. The redundancies are still being worked through. The unions who we'll be hearing from in Business Live at 11:30 are likely to tell us that this is a consequence of a lack of planning over the last few years ahead of the closure. It's always been Tata, the owner's view that losing £1 million a day, it could not continue at that rate without significant subsidy in the cost of energy. Britain has quite high industrial energy prices. The government has wanted, and Tata is now undergoing a transition to electric arc furnaces, which will be greener. They won't be able to make virgin steel. They'll use scrap steel to create the product that comes out of there, but they will require fewer staff, and it won't be 2028 perhaps at the earliest before that is in operation. The unions will tell us, I suspect, that if work had begun sooner. It's something Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, told me when I spoke to him recently, that he came in July, of course, got the best deal he thinks he could, but conversation should have started earlier. Ratcliffe-on-Soar would have been the source, the kind of place that for many of the years of Port Talbot's century of operation, it got its power. We can see them there, the very distinctive cooling towers people will recognise from driving through the East Midlands, seeing those over the Soar Valley in Nottinghamshire. They've been there for more than 50 years. Coal once provided the majority of Britain's power. It still provides around a third of the electricity in the world, but is being phased out in developed countries, and that is the last power station in the UK. And tonight at midnight, the turbines will stop turning, and the UK will no longer be using coal. Of course, many will argue that while the rest of the world, particularly China, is expanding its coal fleet, us closing down ours doesn't make an enormous amount of difference. But given the huge volumes of carbon and the responsibility of coal power, the contribution towards climate change, it's the direction this country has chosen to go in. It's been helped, the closure of the weaning off coal power has been helped enormously by Britain's ability to build renewables. We have the great resource of North Sea wind, which will replace in time oil and gas from there too. But in the transition, and while we move through this phase, we will see the requirement to use gas and nuclear as a base to supplement the renewable power. But certainly today really reminds us that we are, when we talk about transition, this is what it means. We will be closing power stations and closing industries that have provided stable, pretty stable anyway, employment in parts of the UK. We just saw Grangemouth, didn't we, in Scotland close earlier this month. This transition is real. It is happening. And if you start on either side of the road is good, either the side that was using lots of carbon, getting to the other side, getting to the low carbon side of the road is where we want to get to. But right now, and the generation we are in the process of crossing that road, and that is going to see massive change for many people and many industries. And the challenge for governments, this new one in particular, as it plots its industrial strategy, is how to minimise the impact on those who are losing and how to maximise the benefits from these new industries.